Welcome back to the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. What could go wrong on a backcountry hunting trip with one of the best outfitters around? Matthew Himsel will tell you about a backcountry trip he almost never lived to tell in his book entitled Carried Away. Good thing you kept a journal, Matt.
I really wrote this down because after I came back from this trip, I was dealing with, I guess PTSD is what you call it these days.
Okay.
It was an Alaskan moose hunt that me and my friend went on, and these hunts are extremely remote. From Anchorage, we flew on one single engine plane basically as far as it can go to get back to Anchorage and land in a very remote strip of dirt to get picked up by our outfitter to then fly to where there's no humans maybe ever have walked on the earth. And things just went completely sideways, really being caused by what we found out was our outfitter's alcoholism.
No.
Yeah, and it led to near plane crashes, two very near misses with those. I had to shoot a bear off of him. We had another grizzly bear come into camp that we had to shoot, which, and a lot of this stuff was preventable. And then gear that when you go on these backcountry hunts, you kind of count on your outfitter. Well, we are completely counting on our outfitter for a lot of the gear that we would otherwise bring when we do our own backcountry hunts. And he he left us with bare minimums and then was hiding gear on us for some reason that we've never figured out. And extremely, extremely dangerous weather that rolled in. And because of that one fail-safe system that he had that you'd otherwise have certain things that you have backups for. We were really on the edge of like hypothermia at times. And, it was, things just went sideways for sure. So I wrote, when I came back, I journal, like I said, and then my wife suggested, hey, it might be a good idea to just write this out in kind of a longer format because it helps just get it out in the air, just get it out there. And once you do that, it kind of helps you process the fact that like, okay, you've been through this, it's happened. You can kind of put it away.
Yeah.
And that did help. But then, if a lot of my friends and family knew that I was going on this hunt, and it's a pretty epic adventure. And when I came back, everyone, saw the pictures of the harvest that we took. Because in the end, if you just looked at, the pictures of the animals that we harvested, it looked like an extremely just successful hunt. And that's where it ends. And then you start telling the story and getting into the details. And I ended up talking through entire dinners about the story, just gatherings with friends and family and stuff. So I decided rather than make my wife sit there and listen to the same story over and over again for hours, I handed a few people what I'd written out to deal with that PTSD. And I quickly got feedback from my friends and family that, like, Matt, that was a page turner. Like, you've got something here. So I never intended this to be a book, but the feedback that I got from everybody that had read it, they kind of gave me the confidence to seek out a publisher, to get this, it finished off and polished off to be what the end story is now. So
Did you research this outfit before you left?
Yeah. And that's, the story kind of gets into that this gentleman that we used, Carrie, my book is called Carried Away. He's a world renowned, or he was, I can get into that later. He was a world renowned outfitter. And I, Doug, my friend that went with us, had a friend that outfitted in Alaska for about 20 years until he just got physically too old to continue to do it.
Right.
And we called him up, and he, without hesitation, said, Carrie. Um, and what we found was through the 2 weeks that we were out in the bush with this guy, um, when COVID hit, it pretty much shut down Alaska's hunting season for a year.
Okay.
And up in Alaska, and that's what he lives and breathes is for this hunting season. It's what motivates him and keeps going. And when that shut down, Alaska can be a tough place on a person mentally, physically, being dark all the time. Um, and him and his wife, who never were drinkers, turned to that and developed a really bad drinking problem that just overtook him, and it happened quickly. Um, and that spiraling of their alcoholism led to him just not being able to be prepared for this hunting season. We went in the middle of COVID,
Oh,
and this was the first season since he had developed this really bad drinking problem that led to this spiraling of him getting out to the campsite late, not bringing all of the gear that we needed, and really just kind of leaving us to fend on it for ourselves in the middle of this adventure. So
you must have thought you were going to die.
there were a couple times, for sure. I mean, I almost watched Doug die on a plane with him. They recovered miraculously. I really still don't know how they did. Um, you know, Having to shoot multiple bears, one off of Carrie. Um, when a bear's tangled up with a person and you have to pull that trigger,
Oh,
um,
I.
it's that one will probably always carry with me. And I was 250 yards away when I had to pull that trigger.
Oh,
Um, it was very real. Death was a very, very real scenario out there. Which, when you go backcountry hunting in Alaska or anywhere really, um, it is a possibility that you face. But we try to take every precaution that we
yeah.
can to avoid the things that are expected. Like bears in Alaska, we expect. And he had a bear fence that he brought with him, but he refused to put it up for whatever reason. I still can't wrap my head around that fact. And for us as clients, you run a tightrope of inserting yourself too much about how things need to proceed,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
um, because we're totally cut off from the outside world out there. And if we start pushing ourselves too much, it's not uncommon for an outfitter just to be done with a client and say, hey guys, sorry, we heard a really nasty weather storm's coming in and we've got a couple clear days of flying, we got to leave camp,
Right.
hunt's over. So it's a tap dance that you've got to play, and it's not my equipment to touch. So it's like, Carrie, we could set this fence up, it would take us 10 minutes, but I don't know, he just refused to do it. And so it's things like that lead you to, everything starts adding up to a situation of your spidey senses really get on edge about, like, in mother nature, you don't mess around, and you start making mistakes here, there, and the other, and death can happen really quickly in the backcountry. And I just, we escaped so many situations that we really are lucky to be alive, for sure.
What did you do when you got home?
Well, that's when I wasn't really sure if it affected me as bad as it did. Like my wife, she could see I was carrying a burden on me that I didn't know I had. And that's when she approached me, and she knew the story. She could hear me relaying these accounts. And she's the one, as the outside observer, that saw that I was carrying a lot of this stress with me day in and day out,
Yeah.
and sleeping, and that's why I wrote this. But the appeal of the book, um, hunters, non-hunters alike, um, pilot groups that I belong to have all found this just a captivating story. And I think the appeal here is more so, even more so than just the like the danger and the hunting and whatever else. But I think you can see throughout the theme of the book when you read it is that Doug and I did everything that we could to prepare mentally and physically for this trip, as we always do. Um, but you really find there's a mettle in you that you have or you don't have when confronted with these situations, that Doug and I just remained positive throughout the entire experience, and we never let that negative seed ever get planted and watered in our minds throughout the trip. And Doug and I just kept striving forward and maintaining positivity amongst each other, or amongst ourselves. That really is the attitude of perseverance and survival that you must have in these situations. Otherwise, the dark and the negative can really overwhelm you. So I think that's the theme that others that have never been on backcountry, or not necessarily hunting.
Mm.
It was a hunting trip, but I think in the end, the story kind of relays like the human endeavor of just survival, and how you have to maintain your wits and a positive attitude. And not only can you survive, but you can thrive in these situations.
I have goosebumps.
Yeah, thank you.
Matthew Himsel, author of Carried Away. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
Who better to write a book about how to pair particular wines with particular dishes than a successful chef from South Florida and a wine writer and connoisseur? Chef Jan Jorgensen and Todd Wernstrom have teamed up to write A Cook's Table, Food and Wine Together. Welcome, Todd. Tell us how you guys got from there to here.
Jan is the chef owner of a restaurant in Miami, Florida called Two Chefs. That's been in business essentially for 35 years, which in South Florida is a pretty extraordinary feat. And I was when we first got together, I was a wine writer and the executive editor of a publication called Wine News Magazine, and I knew Jan because of that, because we would do all sorts of trade events at his restaurant. Like when winemakers would come into town, we would go to Two Chefs for lunches or dinners to like discuss the wines and taste the wines. And Jan is very adept at matching his menu to whatever the wines were being brought into the restaurant. So that's how we became friendly. And then from that sort of professional context, we developed a friendship. And he was in the process of writing the book, a cookbook that had a real big wine emphasis on it. This is going back into like the early 2000s. That's how long ago this project took to get to fruition. He was working with a food writer from the Miami Herald and the wine writer from the Miami Herald at that time, but then they at some point decided to um, no longer be involved in the project. And Jan called me up one day and he said, "Hey, why don't you come over? Let's drink some wine and let's talk about the book." And so we did that. And he asked me if I wanted to get on board. And I said, "Yeah, sure, let's do it." So basically, I was the writer of the book. And we basically threw out everything that the three of them had done and started from scratch. Uh, and so I moved to New York City in 2007. And then for whatever reason, we sort of put the project on hold because we still had a ton of work to do. And, life, intrudes. Then he was doing his restaurant and I was doing my thing in New York City. And then when COVID happened, that first COVID stop in everything, the former associate publisher of Wine News Magazine, who we're both friendly with, her name is Elizabeth Smith, she actually sent an email to the two of us and said, boys, you don't have anything else to do. Why don't you get back on the book? And we were like, you know what, why not? And so, if you look, but at this point, so we're talking about 2020, October of 2020, basically, we sort of unshelved the project and got down to the business of finishing the book. And it literally took us, I want to say, so that's October 2020 to basically September of 2024 is when we finally hit send. And and then it went into like layout and all of this stuff. But it took it was a lot of writing and rewriting, and particularly because it's a 100% joint collaboration. But Jan is the food expert, I'm the wine expert, but I did all the writing. So what we did was, the book is essentially, like I said, it's a cookbook that has a huge wine emphasis, and the way it's sort of formatted is we take the most commercially important grapes, Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc, Riesling, Syrah, Cabernet Sauvignon, like that, and that's a chapter. Like each one would be a chapter, like a Chardonnay chapter, and the recipes, the 10 to 15 recipes in that chapter would all be sort of grounded in a style of Chardonnay, whether it's old world or new world, unoaked or oaked or whatever. And so there would be a wine pairing, not a producer or a bottle, but a style pegged toward that recipe that we would recommend. And each chapter has each chapter, say Chardonnay again, there's an introductory wine essay by me where I talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of that particular grape and the grape styles. And then we go into the recipes, and each recipe starts off with Jan's origin story for where the recipe came from. And it could be he was inspired by Babette's Feast, or some supplier came in one day with some unbelievable like whitewater clams, and so his brain got to thinking that way. Or their traditional sort of Danish, he's from Denmark originally, recipe that he tweaked or whatever, or other classics. And that's what we would do. We would so to peg the wine style to the particular recipe, and that's what the book is about. And so that it really was a lot of work, but we're really happy with the result.
I mean, just the effort to pair every recipe with a wine. I mean, is there a recipe for that? How do you do that?
That's a good question, and that's a question that people ask all the time. And the truth, at the end of the day, and I've been saying this for decades, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. There are very few perfect, whether you use air quotes on that or not, wine and food matches, but there are also correspondingly very few horrible matches. But there is a universe of good to better than good in between. And there are different strategies that you can use to pair food and wine. Sometimes it's a textural thing, like the dish, say it's butter poached lobster. Well, that screams richness, right? And so you could match a white Burgundy style of Chardonnay, which is like rich and full bodied to that, and you go texture on texture. Sometimes you just want to pick up an aromatic note, like if there's some citric or vaguely green sort of element to the dish, like if you're having asparagus or something like that, then you look for the corresponding wine that sort of mimics the aromatics in that. Like Sauvignon Blanc is a good example. Like it's often very citric and very green. And so you pick up something from the aromatics in the plate, and you do the same with the wine. Or sometimes you go the exact opposite. You take, if the dish is like really, really rich, you go lean with the wine, because you want the wine sort of in the background, as opposed to being the thing that's jumping, that's like really hitting your palate and your aromatic senses, right? So you let the wine be a little more in the background. And Jan, his philosophy, and I would echo this, has always been, at the end of the day, wine is food, and you should treat it the way you treat any ingredient. Like, you figure out where it belongs, or more importantly, where it does not belong, and you go from there. And I think that's sort of the philosophy that we've sort of channeled throughout the 350 pages of this book. And I think we did a really good job doing that and simplifying the process for people as well, because they feel that wine and food, or wine by itself, or like food, is just so daunting. And at the end of the day, it's really not. And people know more than they think they do. They're just not necessarily armed with the language of it. And people think that that's very intimidating. And we go to great lengths, I think, in this book to sort of demystify and make it's not all about what the so-called experts say. Lead yourself, use your own nose and your own palate, and you figure out a lot more than you think you can.
Yes, it is so intimidating. People think that, this isn't for me. I can't do this. I don't know the difference between, whatever, Pinot and Riesling, right?
Right. The point of the book is to just, sit back and enjoy it. And here are a couple of tools, if I would even call them that, to help you sort of navigate what people think is inherently complicated, and it really is not.
Right. Right.
The underlying philosophy related to the book, it's what, that's how I go about leading tastings for people. It's not actually any different. And invariably, when I do these tastings, there's always going to be food on the table anyway, because you don't want to be tasting wine just like 5 or 6 or 8 wines, right? There's always food. So people always ask questions about matching up food to wine. So that always becomes part of it. I'm like, oh, if you like to cook, go buy my book, that kind of thing.
Right.
Because I'm in New York City and Jan is in South Florida. He has done, like, there's Books and Books is like a super famous bookstore in South Florida. He did an author, reading event.
I love this. We're demystifying the wine food connection.
Right, sure.
So, yeah. Thanks so much for taking the time to talk to me. You are Todd Wernstrom, and with Jan Jorgensen, authors of A Cook's Table, Food and Wine Together. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the time. I appreciate it.
Crystal J. Sanchez Silva is a mental health therapist in Chicago, which came in handy when an incident during her daughter's soccer game inspired her children's book entitled Feelings on the Field. Crystal, how long ago did this happen?
Well, actually, it was about 2 years ago. And it was actually just after having my daughter in soccer and her having a bit of this kind of an experience that I wrote about. And then I just found myself really using some of the therapeutic techniques that I use with my clients. And that kind of sparked an idea of, there are a lot of parents that probably go through these experiences with their kids and feeling lost in that moment of how to help her figure out those emotions. And that's when I just started a little bit of a storyboard. I started writing things down, the little story that I felt could be relatable to a lot of kids and parents. So yeah, I would say about the 2 years ago when that happened.
So you never really wrote before that, I guess, other than professional,
papers. So it was professional writing. So you would say I have to write a lot of notes.
Yeah.
I would have to write clinical assessments, things like that. So yeah, I guess that counts. But as far as writing stories, no.
But so is Emily, the little girl in your book, based on your daughter?
Yes. So she was little, she was on the field. There was a bully. Bully was saying mean things to her and her teammates. And I think what caught me off guard was I had never seen her like shut down like that during the game, because she loves playing the game so much. So then I saw she's same, just like in the story, she sat down, she didn't want to play anymore, she was upset. And my husband and I were like, do we push her? Do we not push her? Like, how should we react? And then, both of us just started telling her, okay, well, what is it that you're feeling? And, but what is it that you want to do here? You have a choice. And, we sat her down on the grass and we grounded her. And then as soon as she started realizing, wait, I have a choice in something, and she saw that the bully was, saying mean things. I think another teammate started crying too, and a little girl. And so then she's like, no, I want to go play. And so that's what kind of went into the story. So I think in that moment I was like, oh my God, I have to write this down because I can't believe this just happened.
How old is Emily in the book?
Now she's 9. When this happened, she was about 6, 7.
So the bully is about 6 or 7.
Yes, probably more on the 7 side. Yeah,
Was it a girl or a guy?
it was a girl.
She was a mean girl already?
Yeah, I was. She was saying like, "You're going down, and I'm gonna crush you." And I was like, "What?"
Really?
I was so surprised. Yes, because at that age, I hadn't heard that stuff before. Like we had played several games, so I think that's what caught us all off guard. I mean, we've seen little kids shoving and pushing, but to start, saying things like "You're a loser," "You're going down," like, oh my God, I wasn't expecting that early.
But what does Emily do in the book?
So she learns the content of the techniques is based off of what I do in my practice of cognitive behavioral therapy. So we really focus on grounding yourself in that moment in time, using your 5 senses in order to stimulate new narratives of thinking and focus. For example, in the book, she thinks about all the mean words, and so that's where her thoughts are, the mean words of what she's saying. And when we think about the mean words, we feel horrible because our thoughts are fixated on a negative element in that moment in time. And so when our thoughts are negative, our feelings come along with it. So that anger, the sadness. So in cognitive behavioral therapy, we narrow down on, well, let's change the thoughts. How can we change the thoughts? And so the first element is, well, let them out. Talk about what are the thoughts that you're having. And then when we let them out, then we create space for something different. So that's where she started to take the deep breaths. And so counting the 1, 2, 3, her thoughts are focusing on the numbers instead of the bad thoughts. And so then as she started looking on the grassy field, she's looking at the green and the yellows and the browns of the colors around her. And then she is grounded into what is it that she has a power over or control over. And then those thoughts of, wait, I can not play and feel this way, or I can play and my thoughts would be about kicking the ball, and that's where I feel good. So that's where I went into the description of, she kicked to the left, she kicked to the right, and that's how she was able to focus her thoughts on something that changed her emotional response to the moment.
Does a 6 or 7-year-old understand all that?
Well, the concepts for 6, 7-year-olds, it's really identifying where they have an actual choice or power over something in their lives. For a lot of kids, they're told what to do or they're given instructions on what to do. So the feeling of powerlessness is very heavy for a lot of kids. And so the simple thing of, well, what do you want to wear today? Do you choose this or do you choose that? Do you choose to sit here and cry and not play, or do you choose to focus on how you're going to kick the ball around this person and go make and score? So their ability to choose, they know that concept. But just knowing that I'm choosing something and my thoughts are focused on this new idea, that's the cognitive behavioral therapy piece. So that's where we can focus on that, because I could describe it as, think about how the grass feels on your hands, or the sound of your foot hitting the ball. Those are grounding techniques that will help them focus on their thoughts in a different way.
And what about the bully?
Yes, so the bully was very upset at the end of the game because they ended up losing. But yeah, I mean, I think the way that we describe the bully, and what helps a lot is we don't have control over why the bully says what they're saying. But what you do have control over is how you want to respond to it. So that's how we kind of separate. The bully is saying those things because of their own life. But in your life, what do you have a choice over?
Do we deal with the bully in the book?
No, in the book, we are just focused on her emotional
Okay.
response, on her using those techniques to let out her feelings, to make her body feel better, and to put her body into action. I think it's an example where this was a one-time thing. Like, this is a game that she'll face new people different times. But if there was something else, the ref would have called it out. And two, in other situations, if a child has an ongoing bully at school, then yeah, that would be like a different story.
Okay.
But I think in this moment, I just wanted to focus on, for any child, you can change your thoughts in that moment, and your feelings can, also feel better.
This would be a great, little chat to have at the beginning of soccer season. Like, here's a book. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, no, definitely, definitely. Yeah, so actually, so I have my 9-year-old, and then the other little girl in the book, Sophia, that's my other little daughter. And I've done career fairs at their school.
Hmm.
And no lie, when Emily was in kindergarten, I did a career fair, and I brought different feeling books.
Hmm.
And one of the little girls was like, "Did you write any of these?" And I'm like, "Oh, no, no, but maybe I could, maybe I should." And so I did do that this last year. The book wasn't finished yet, so I just printed out, the copies, and it was so much easier to explain what I did as a therapist using the book, because
Yes.
it gives that illustration of, this is a hard feeling, what I do with this hard feeling, and it's okay to have this hard feeling, and then there's ways to feel better with it. So yeah, that is definitely part of what I would like to continue doing, um because I've used so much illustrations and books when I do therapy for kids, and they just need to see that image of, oh, that looks familiar, that sounds familiar, like, now I understand a little bit more.
Yeah. Awesome. Crystal J. Sanchez, Silva, author of Feelings on the Field. Thank you so much.
No problem, no problem. It was great chatting with you, Alice.
Annie E. Turner worked for one of Mississippi's largest employers, Huntington Ingalls, formerly known as Northrop Grumman Shipbuilding. The company has faced multiple lawsuits and allegations of discrimination in hiring, racial discrimination, sexual harassment, and retaliation. Now, Annie shares her story in her book, My Growth Being in Christ's Business, second edition. Annie, what was your job at the company?
I worked in the labor department, cleanup department. Cleanup lady, done a lot of industrial work on the ships. So I wrote my first book 9 years ago. What happened was, I really didn't know that I was able to write a book, but I was given a prophecy from a pastor from another state that God said I could write a book. And they were going to be so powerful, change a lot of people's lives. So I didn't start writing right away. I waited a while before I started writing, because God kept warning me about, doing He had told me to do. And that's when I really found out I had the gift to write.
So before this pastor came and visited your church and looked at you and said, "You're going to write a book," you had never even thought about writing before.
No, but I have been keeping notes for years, writing stuff down, jotting stuff down on paper and stuff, but just didn't realize that was my gift until God, revealed it to him about what I was going to do, yes. And it had been a discrimination lawsuit that was filed on Ingalls concerning discrimination. So that's what God had me to write about, the discrimination lawsuit that took place. It was a large group of us a part of that lawsuit.
What happened?
Well, the blacks that had been there, a lot of them had been there a long period of time, and what they would do, they would let people come in that had never even been on the job before, and they would come in and be promoted on jobs that we never had a chance to get, because they never would give them to us. And when you applied for it, you couldn't get the job because they just never did give them to us. We were mostly just there, just working though, just trying to make a living and everything. But then we realized a lot of discrimination going on, because they would bring them off the street and hire them and bring them and put them over us. A lot of the white employees that were there, they had never even been on the job working. Like in my case,
What kind of jobs are we talking about?
well, it's a lot of different jobs. You got like professional jobs. You got industrial jobs like welding,
Yeah.
electricians. You got painters, chippers, all type of different work. 36 department engineers, you got CEOs, you got directors, all type of people on the job.
And no matter how qualified a minority worker was, they would not get that job.
No, they were qualified. They were telling them they were overqualified. If they wasn't all qualified, they just pretty much did how they wanted to do it. Like just take you out the department and put them where they wanted to put them at, and overlook the blacks that had been there for years and years working. And like the labor department I worked in, I had been on my job like 17 years when my boss come in. He was only 2 years old when I hired in the shipyard. I had been over 17 years working, and he came in and became our boss. And he wasn't even in the labor department. He was in the paint department, the rough machine operator. But he came in and made supervisor over the labor department. We had been there for years working. And that really pretty much the whole thing that was going on for years, decades at Ingalls, a lot of discrimination.
How long did it take to move this lawsuit through the court system?
Well, it took a long time because we filed a complaint with EOC back in 2000. And after signing the lawsuit in 2000, it went on for years, like 13 years. But it went to court, but the only thing about it, nothing never got done because they kept dismissing the case. And so it didn't really make it a trial, like going to trial, just actually having a hearing.
Right.
Because they kept throwing it out. We kept throwing it out. And so they ended up dismissing it. Because with prejudice, the one that continued to go on, but it went on for about 20 years, really, because after they dismissed those 13 years, still kept fighting for justice, trying to get justice. So about 12 of us opt out because they offered settlement, and some took the settlement and some didn't. Then some went through arbitration and got paid, and some of them didn't get paid through arbitration. So it's just a lot going on there. And so it really and truly been in the courtroom altogether. It would have been about 20 years where they dismissed us. In 2011 was with prejudice, saying that we could never bring it back up again. So it never got settled. The point never got settled.
But some of you got payouts.
Yes, they had. What happened? They had called for a global settlement when we had never heard of. But our attorney explained what a global settlement was, right. And the defendant, which was an English shipbuilder, was saying that we could not get the global settlement unless we all agree to take the global settlement. If one person opt out, that would kill the case.
Wow.
So by us 12 not liking what they had done, us 12 stuck together, and we continued to go on to fight for justice for the other years. Every day of my life, really, to be honest, because I know what went on there for decades, and so many of our ancestors have went through the same thing. And the company been there since 1938. So it's been a long history of discrimination.
So you never got anything?
No, ma'am. Never got anything. No, I got a lot of retaliation for standing up for what was right. Just a lot went on because I thought I was finished, but this was the second book was a continuance because God kept, this was divine calling because God kept letting me know that I was going to have to do what he told me to do by finishing this book. So I was being disobedient to what he told me to do. He wanted me to finish the book, so this is the second continuance. And my first book was 9 years ago, but what happened, my mom died, and that kind of threw me off for a long period of time. So had death and sickness. A lot of things went on, because I couldn't go on because of that had happened at the time.
It's really the book you wrote 9 years ago, and then you rewrote some of
Right.
it and finished it, and now you've published it.
Yes, ma'am. But God kept wanting me. And it's strange how it happened because it really was a divine call. When you read the book, you'll see everything that was going on. God was giving me, there was a lot of supernatural things happening, a lot of things that was happening. He kept wanting me to finish this work he told me to do. So I had to go back and finish what he told me to do.
What kind of supernatural things happened?
I got injured on the job, and he let me know, too, there's a lot of lawyers, doctors involved, a lot of people in high places. And that's why he had gave me this book to write, because he said, with so many other people going through the same thing that I was going through. And he kept wanting me about the book to get it finished. And so there's a lot in there to tell my story, to let them see. Once God give you a word, and he's not dead, he's alive, you have to do what he tell you to do, because the scripture he gave me what really kept me strong through all those years. And let me say, too, he also gave me the title of my book, My Growth Being in Christ Business. He gave me the title, and he also gave me the scripture, which is 1 Peter 4:12 through 14 that really kept me through all those years of my trials and tribulations that I had to go through. All those scriptures kept me strong through those years I had to go through all of this. It's been going on for a long period of time. But I give God all the glory.
Annie, what do you do now? Where do you go out and talk about this book? How do you bring attention to this book?
Well, I talk about it with a lot of people. A lot of people stop me and ask me a lot of things concerning what happened, because a lot of them don't know I got fired. They think I just retired, but I didn't retire, because some things I couldn't reveal, but God would let me know what I could reveal. So I talked about it with a lot of people. A lot of people know.
Are you in any way nervous about going out and speaking against this company publicly?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am. See, I'm going to tell you, and when they read the second edition, they're going to know it's God. I have been in my first church, which is a church here in Moss Point, Mississippi, 15 years. And when God told me to leave that church and go to this other church, I didn't want to leave because I had just got my husband started to come to church, and he had joined the church I was at first. So God had me go to another church, and it's all in my book. And this pastor didn't know anything about me, nothing. I had never discussed nothing with him about my business or anything. And he was telling me everything that God was giving him, and no way he could have known it, because I never discussed it with him. So he knew a lot about my personal business that I never told him about. So God kept telling me this is a must. I must do this right here. And so that's how he kept.
What do you hope to accomplish? Like, what's the best outcome here?
Well, I know it's going to do what God said for it to do. I mean, it's already done, really. I truly believe it's already done because of the visitation I've had.
Okay.
And the supernatural thing that's continuing to happen. And plus, I know he got his angels encamped around me. So I'm really just willing to do whatever I have to do to please God. Because now, since I've been through so much and I've had visitation from God, all I'm concerned about now is spreading the good news about Jesus and letting people know that he is still alive and he is not dead. He's still living. Because so many times what people look at, and I see a lot going on now, even in the world today, it seems like everybody wants to put Jesus on the back burner. And we can't do that. So he's supposed to be first. So what is happening now is so much going on that's not going right because we're not putting God where he belongs, which is in the first. He's supposed to be first in everything. And so I wasn't there all the time either, but I thank God for the chastisement because of the chastisement you've given me from the time I started writing this book up until now. My faith is strictly in God. So I don't have no reason to fear man because I done been through so much. And what else can happen, other than telling the truth to let the people know it's time for us to go all in for Christ, for Jesus. Because he is the light. Darkness can't shine in light, but light can shine in darkness. So that's where I'm at now because of all the things I had to go through, the suffering, and my family, not only did I suffer, they suffered with me.
I'm sure.
And I lost a lot because I had been on this doctor. He did me wrong. That's why God was saying, go back. And he revealed him too. By the scripture he gave me about this doctor. And this doctor here, they knew about his wrongdoing, but they still held him his wrongdoing for my second edition come in at. They held him up instead of disciplining him. They made it like it was okay what he was doing, but it caused me a lot of physical and mental problems.
What a story.
Yes, ma'am.
Annie E. Turner, author of My Growth Being in Christ's Business, 2nd edition. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me.
Robert Williams Jr. is a man who beat the odds, and he credits his success with divine intervention. The name of his book, From Poverty to the Pentagon. Robert, what a journey you've had.
So I spent 30 years in the Navy, worked for the government for 5 years. Then God decided he was going to do something different with me. So I'm currently going to school to become a therapist and working on a program with about 5 gentlemen to help folks that are leaving prison transition to become productive citizens.
That's a noble effort. Try to get those recidivism rates down, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I grew up with a bunch of folks who got caught in the system.
Yeah.
And I could have easily, have been one of them. And so this man met with me a couple of weeks ago. He was going to move out of the States and said that God told him to stay here and work with me on this project.
Well, you decided to share your life story in your book, From Poverty to the Pentagon.
Yes.
Any particular reason you decided to do that now?
Well, about 6 years ago, he told me to start writing the book. And then I kept being hard-headed, and wouldn't finish it. And he told me to work for 4 years. I worked for 5. He said, it's time for you to leave. And so my youngest brother had a kidney transplant in December of 23, was not doing well in July of 25. So God made me leave my job. I went home to Texas for 6 weeks to help my mom and him recover. And right before I left, one of my employees asked if he could meet with me. And he's like, sir, I've been having something to tell you, but I don't know how to tell you. And I was like, just say it. He said, God told me to tell you to finish your book. So while I was in Texas, I finished writing it and reached out to a publishing company, and they never called me back. And then my mom found a publishing company here, Page Publishing. They gave me a call. The lady I spoke to, her late husband's name was Robert. And the guy that I work with, name was Trevor. And so the significance with that is a couple of years ago, I played an author in a Christmas production at our church, and my name was Trevor. And so it was just, and it's been fantastic.
Tell me about your life.
We lived in the projects for my first 4 years of life in Houston, Texas, in a subdivision called Smith Addition, right at the Port of Houston. So in the late 60s, they decided they were going to move us out of our neighborhood and build this bridge called 610 Ship Channel. So all of us had to move. And at that point, my parents were going their separate ways. My dad decided he wanted to live a separate life. And so right after my mom had given birth to my sister, we moved a couple of blocks away. It was very rough growing up because the police would come to our neighborhood, and they were judge, jury, and executioner. And so every once in a while, if they felt like, hey, I want to go to that neighborhood and beat up some people or treat them really badly, they could. And we had no recourse. We were not allowed across this one street called Broadway after dark unless you had specific business. And grew up around of alcohol establishments, drugs, and they got worse as more drugs were introduced into the United States. A lot of prostitution. Grew up with some murderers, some thieves, but my mom always wanted her children to do well. My mom says I was born a grown-up, and I was very serious from a little kid. 4th grade, I had a traumatic experience. If you read the book, I thought my teacher hated me. She punished me in a very cruel way. But it wasn't that she hated me. She just did not want me hanging around some miscreants. And that was the turning point for me to be academically inclined. So I attended a church. We were the poor family. People looked down on us. And people would say, we would never grow up to be anything in society. Most of my serious friends were upper middle class Caucasian girls. We would have conversation, and they would tell me about stuff I probably didn't want to hear about. but I was a big brother to them, and we truly enjoyed it. And then I had two Hispanic friends, Roberto and Quay. We had another friend named Alan, a friend named Jody, who was Caucasian. And in high school, Jody and I used to dance. And so we were never treated like freshmen, which is really neat. But being poor was hard, but somehow, because I like to have fun, people would always invite me to parties because I, would always encourage people just to accept each other. And then when it came to college, I messed up and lost a Division I scholarship to play basketball at a Division I school. And my math teacher paid for me to take the SAT, took me to take the SAT, gave me bus fare to come home, and registered me for Historical Black University, which to me was probably one of the best things that could have ever happened. While there, I met my math professor, and he was truly a mentor and a friend. In the 80s, racial prejudice between whites and blacks were still pretty high. And 87, I had a classmate who was a white guy, and we're like brothers today. So he tricked me into becoming a lifeguard and water safety instructor, and I helped him not be afraid where he was the minority at the school. And to this day, we helped people cross over the racial lines to respect each other as human beings. And even our professor would introduce him when he would return back as his son. And so he was really trying to open the eyes that our outside complexion had nothing to do with who we were as human beings. While in school, my junior year, I got married. My wife was in her senior year of high school. I prayed to God. I said, I need a job, but I don't want to go to work, and I need a car. I didn't even ask for a place to live. So I had a dream. He opened up this window. He outpours this red car. So we had one son, and we're expecting the second one. And my first car was a 1989 Hyundai Excel. And I was selected for commissioning program in the Navy. And as long as I maintain a 3.0 GPA, I could pick whatever field that I could go into. I majored in math, the minor in physics, got commissioned in 1990. So during my naval career, it was really awestruck. I couldn't believe God allowed me to experience the experiences that he did. And so I've been mentoring people ever since, and just wanted to always be positive and thankful that God didn't leave me where I started. Not that the people are bad, but the situation was set up for us not to make it out.
Yeah, I mean, and every time I talk to someone who has an amazing story like you do, and who manages to beat the odds and rise above to a point no one ever anticipated, what is it that you have that other people don't? And so often it comes down to faith. And all of these signs that you got along the way, it's possible we all get signs, but do we all pay attention to them?
And I think we don't. A young man was telling me the other day, I really don't hear God talking to me. And I was like, well, by me running into you and I'm talking to you about God, he's talking to you. And so you say, what helped me to get out? One, I had a praying mother. She made us go to church. And I asked God when I was graduating if he would keep me over the summer. I just wanted to party over the summer, and then I would really open up the Bible and truly learn about who he is. So he kept me over the summer. I started reading my Bible. I thought I was the only Christian on campus. And some of my sisters were like, well, you need girlfriends. And I said, I do. I have a whole bunch of them. I don't have enough time to myself. And they were like, well, who are your girlfriends? I said, English, science, math. And, they're like, you're crazy.
How are you getting this message out? It sounds like you're on a path that will naturally bring your book along. You're going to be helping people lift themselves out of prison.
Yes. So you're the first podcast. I've already had a Zoom interview. We have a local station here that I'm going to contact so that I can get on their website or on their show to discuss it. And then I know my mom is going to write God and Country. She's right in the midst of reading the book right now. And so I'm just really asking God, how does he want me to do it? I attend a church with about 3,000 members. My pastor is currently reading it. And then at some point, I want to do some book signing events. Yeah.
You got to keep writing?
Yeah. So the next book is going to be entitled, What Would I Do? If you remember the old saying, don't judge a man until you walk a mile in his moccasin.
Mm-hmm.
So some of the stories that I mentioned in the current book, there's a few more, and I want to tell it from the point of view. People are going through so many things in this life, and I want to tell how they may or may not should respond. And then I want to ask the question to the reader, how would you do? And if confronted, would you be willing to help? Because we're losing that human connection because of our addiction to IT. I don't have to have emotions. If I don't feel like talking to somebody, I could just get on the computer. I could get on my phone, and I just want to get out and share. We need a love revolution. That makes sense.
We need a connection. We need to connect.
Yes.
Human.
Yes.
Face to face.
Human.
I think that's
Yes.
going to be the next big thing. I think
Yes.
the pendulum is going to swing back. I have kids in their 30s and
Yes.
they are repulsed by social media.
Yes.
I think that's a beautiful thing. What a story, man. Robert Williams Jr., author of From Poverty to the Pentagon. Thanks so much.
Well, I appreciate it, Miss Alice, and I have kids in in their 30s too, and I truly applaud that they're saying no more.
Matthew J. Parker has been writing all of his life, but he's just getting around to finishing a lot of the stories he started. Now he's published his first book, part of a 3-part series entitled The Lost Last Prophecy.
The story came to me, I do a lot of reading, a lot of different type of stuff. And so I had just become interested in, Nostradamus and some of his prophecies and how they were coming about. And then, so the story came to me that this is the lost last prophecy of Nostradamus, and dealing with kind of end times, but like a global leader that will rise up, and then he's forecasting that. And some 4 college friends stumble upon this lost prophecy, and now they're the only people that have it. So they've identified this global leader that'll rise, and so they make a pact we're going to infiltrate that organization and become rich and powerful by attaching ourselves to that individual.
This is very involved.
It is, and it's also, so then I I had about 3 different stories kind of, that I was working on. And then, so this book encompasses 3 different themes because they're intersecting stories, and obviously going with the overall one of the Nostradamus, but there's other stories about, family and good versus evil and those kinds of things that all intersect in this book.
Well, you have a brave freelance journalist who finds out about their plan.
Yes.
And what happens? What happens with her?
Then she stumbles upon this plan, and these 4 friends are trying to get part of this, which is a evil type of corporation that he's rising in. And so someone like Nostradamus wouldn't understand a multinational Amazonish type of company.
Right.
Therefore, but she finds out that they're, infiltrating this organization, and they're using a lot of really sneaky and deceitful things to get people to attach themselves to this company. And so she finds out all these plans and starts to divulge them. And then, of course, they come after her as well, because they don't want, the plans being out there. And then there's a young girl that happens that performs a miracle, and saving a young boy. She's also involved with that writing, but then this organization also comes against the little girl because she's professing stuff that they don't want the American public to attach themselves to. So that all these stories are intersecting in that way.
Where do you leave us at the end of the first book?
It's one of those things, because again, it's a 3-book series. It's one of those things where some success, in a good versus evil battle, but obviously there's still a lot more that's going to go on, and I'm about 2 months away from finishing the second book, and a lot of really big twists and turns in that book already. So.
Jeez, do people know what you're up to, Matthew?
Oh yeah. Telling people, obviously on Facebook, I have a website that's currently under construction, MatthewJohnParker.com. Then I'm working on that, and so I'm pushing things out in all those directions. Charlotte's a good market for writing, and so I will progress in those areas as well.
Okay, sounds like a plan. Matthew J. Parker, The Lost Last Prophecy. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
William R. Baker Jr. was a hospital administrator for decades before he decided to look into some family history. It led him to publish his book, Live Free or Die, The Life and Times of John Stark. So you took a circuitous route to writing this book, didn't you? It's
interesting. I spent my entire career as a hospital administrator at Mass General, and my beat, so to speak, was women's care. And as a non-clinical administrator, I was involved in returning obstetrics to Mass General after an absence of 40 years. And I mention it only because that experience provided material for my thesis for the American College of Healthcare Executives. And when we celebrated the 10th anniversary of returning obstetrics to Mass General Hospital, it was suggested that we make my thesis into a monograph that would be at everyone's place setting when we celebrated the return of obstetrics. And subsequently, Mass General celebrated its bicentennial. And I was approached. Someone on high said, you did that monograph for returning obstetrics. Why don't you, on the occasion of celebrating the hospital's bicentennial, write a bicentennial history of women's care at Mass General? And that's what I did. And Mass General, being around for 200 years, not surprisingly, has an archives and an archivist. And that's what kind of got me going in terms of writing nonfiction history. My grandfather was named Stark, and my grandmother was the keeper of the family genealogy. And we were raised to believe that we were direct descendants of John Stark, the American Revolutionary War general. And I always had it in my mind to learn more about John Stark. And when I retired, that's what I did. And I read the available biographies of John Stark, and I thought I could do better. And the pandemic really allowed me to become a full-time writer. And so I would say, Alice, that start to finish, over 7 years, I completed the task of writing this new biography of John Stark. His story, I think, is one that needs to be better known. Live free or die is the New Hampshire state motto. It's a quote from John Stark. Very few, based on my sampling, it's remarkable how few people know who John Stark is, or that where the New Hampshire state motto came from. And I think, particularly now, as we're celebrating the 250th anniversary of the American Revolution, that there's an audience, not just in New Hampshire and New England, but his story deserves to be much more widely known. So that's my hope.
Did you find out anything we didn't already know about John Stark?
I found out, for example, are you aware of the fact that without what John Stark did at the Battle of Bunker Hill, you could make the argument that the rebellion would have been squashed? Are you aware that at the Battle of Trenton, Stark played an absolutely pivotal role in making that battle a success? He was the hero. He's best known in these parts as the hero of the Battle of Bennington. Because of what happened in Bennington, it can be argued that the American victory at Saratoga might never have happened. So I think the argument could be made that John Stark, at least based on performance, was the best battlefield commander in the American Revolution. Stark lived to the age of 93. In a way, he was like an 18th century Forrest Gump. He was part of so many noteworthy events in American history, beginning with the French and Indian War. He was an Ulster Scot. His family came to this country from what is now Northern Ireland, settled in New Hampshire on the frontier, and he was captured by the Indians when he was a young man, and he became very accomplished as a woodsman, and ultimately, I guess you could say, as a wilderness warrior. So I think it's important to note that my book is not just a biography of John Stark, but as the title says, it's the life and times of John Stark. So you can't tell Stark's story without explaining all of what was happening in American history.
Have you gone out and done any author talks?
I'm hoping to gain some traction with author talks here locally and at the New Hampshire Historical Society and hopefully other places, bookshops and so on and so forth.
And, with the anniversary coming up, right, I would think that hopefully there would be more interest in all of our history.
Yeah.
And more opportunities. So maybe not just the New Hampshire Historical Society, but you were, like you said, he was in the Battle of Trenton. That's New Jersey.
Right.
There's a historical society here. You could just follow him, where he fought his battles.
Exactly.
It's really interesting stuff, and it's amazing you did this. You're not a historian. Clearly, you have a gift for writing that somebody noticed where you worked, and if they hadn't pointed out to you, you might not have even written this book.
Well, as my colleague said, you should have been a writer. I'm not sure whether that was a compliment or not as a hospital administrator. But, I guess, Alice, people are familiar with George Washington.
Yes.
They're familiar with Horatio Gates and Nathaniel Greene and Henry Knox. People ought to be aware of John Stark in the same breath.
Do you know exactly how your ancestry
Well,
traces?
That's a good question. As I said, my grandmother was the keeper of the family genealogy, and she was a real New Englander with family members in New Hampshire. I mean, she traces her New England heritage way, 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 way back. And one of the first things that I did when I was after retiring was I paid some money to the New England Historic Genealogical Society to find out exactly how I was related to John Stark. I really wanted to be his great, 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 great grandson. I didn't want to be his great, 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 great nephew. Well, to make a long story short, we're not as directly related as my grandmother would hope. The Ulster Scot migration occurred in the late 17th century and really involved a lot of people from Londonderry coming to New England, to Boston, where they spread out and headed to places like Worcester and New Hampshire and Maine. About 50 years before, there was an Englishman named Aaron Stark who went from England to Groton, Connecticut, and from Groton, Connecticut, his progeny wound up in Pennsylvania, and that's where my grandfather was born. So I do maintain that I am related to John Stark, but I'd have to go back to Scotland to some probably churchyard to find out, to see the graves of or the family lineage of the Starks.
Get on that. That'll be your second book.
Yeah.
All right. William R. Baker, Jr., author of Live Free or Die, The Life and Times of John Stark. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Alice.
Illiana Esparza is a bankruptcy attorney and author of a children's book. It is entitled Jeremiah James and the Case of the Missing Pets. Now, when do you sneak writing into your day?
When I wrote the book, I was actually a public defender at the time, and I was able to work from home. So I was home with my kids especially. So.
Oh, how many kids do you have?
I have 2 boys. Yeah, so my son, he was 8 years old at the time, and he was struggling with reading in school. We had just switched him schools, and the district we moved to had a faster paced curriculum than the one he was at. So he was really struggling, and it made him not want to read at all. So to try to get him interested in reading, we decided to make the book.
You and your son decided to do the book?
Yes.
That must have been a great project to work on with him.
Oh, yes. He was really excited to get to read something about him. So just to come and check in on, like, when's it going to be done? And can I read it yet? That was really exciting for him.
Did he come up with any of the ideas in the book?
He helped with how the pictures should look.
Oh.
But the book itself was a surprise because I wanted to get him excited about reading and reading something in full. So
something strange is happening in Clarksville, and Jeremiah James needs your help.
Yeah, so Jeremiah James is the main character in the book. He lives in a town and he starts noticing that pets are going missing around town. Nobody else seems to really notice it or care about it, but he calls himself a detective, so he kind of investigates the crime with the reader, and then they find the culprit at the end.
Why does he notice and no one else does?
So he's just driving around town with his parents when he sees a sign posted about somebody he knows their pet's missing. And then a couple of days later, he notices another sign. There are cats, dogs, birds, an iguana even. So he seems to believe that they're not just disappearing, that somebody might be stealing them. And he searches for clues and talks to everybody whose pets are missing to find out who it is. The pets go missing on seemingly normal days. Nobody really notices anything suspicious. There is one pet owner who believes someone stole her animal, but other than that, nobody's really comparing or noticing that everyone's pet's going missing. They're just noticing that their pet is going missing. So they talk to Jeremiah James, and he's just kind of getting clues from everybody's story. Somebody describes the person as tall, or somebody who turns in their pet as tall. Somebody else describes a raspy voice of somebody who turned in their pet. And they're just describing attributes of the person. And then he puts it all together. So at the beginning, the pets are just kind of following him home. And then he realizes that people are offering rewards for their pets. So he starts to try to sneak pets away from their house, for example, like with food in his pockets, or at one point he even grabs some animals from their yard.
With the intent of turning them in and collecting money.
A reward, yes.
Well, that's a smart guy. How old's this guy?
It doesn't really specify in the book, but about in his early 20s.
Okay, and how old is Jeremiah?
He's 8 years old.
How does the reader help find the pets?
So it's not interactive, but it's more as if they are having conversations with Jeremiah James, and together they call the pet owners, they speak to the police, but the reader doesn't have a voice role. It's just kind of a partner in the book where dialogue is happening. So first he asks for help. So he says, hey, you, something strange is happening and I need your help. Are you ready to help me solve this case? And then it goes into the story.
Does Jeremiah James go on to solve other mysteries?
Yes, so you do find out the ending in this book, but he does go on to solve other mysteries.
What's next?
This time I'm letting my son decide what the adventure should be. The last one was a surprise. This time will be his decision.
Did this help him? Did it inspire him to read more?
Yes, so during this time I also had him in tutoring. So by the time the book was done, he could read it. He had finished tutoring. He was doing better at reading. And this was really the first bigger book that he read. It's not super long. It's not a novel, but it's bigger than the books that he was used to reading for fun. And he was very excited, and he's read it multiple times now. He took some to his friends at school so they could all read it together. So it just made him excited to read. There was specifically one other kid that they would take turns reading each page. So they read it multiple times. By the end of it, they basically had it memorized.
That is adorable. That must have made you so happy.
It did. It really did.
Are the teachers interested at all in this book?
I know Jeremiah did say he wanted to tell his reading teachers specifically if they could read it as a class project this year.
I think that would be great.
Yes.
All right. Illiana Esparza, author of Jeremiah James and the Case of the Missing Pets. Jeremiah will be solving more mysteries in the future. Thank you so much for talking to me.
Thank you. You have a great day.
We hope you enjoyed this edition of the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable, where authors from all walks of life come together to discuss the trials, tribulations, and triumphs of publishing their books. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. We hope to see you back here every Saturday night at 8 o'clock, or listen to our podcast anytime on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, and PodServe, just to name a few. The Author Roundtable is sponsored by ReaderHouse Online Bookstore, where independent new authors come first.